Welcome back, everyone. Linda here again. For those of you who have just joined us, I have been your host for the day, and I'm also the moderator for this session. So just thrilled to have everyone here. And all I can say about today so far is one word, and it's a big word, those shortened letters, and it is wow. Did we ever have an amazing day thus far? Those two sessions that we have just had have been absolutely excellent. The last one was just so different and innovative and really got people talking and having great conversations. So I'm just thrilled now to head us into the third session of the second day of our PxP conference. And it's entitled, or the aspect that we're looking at over the next hour together, is leading the way as a patient partner in research. And we're going to have examples and tips and resources for patient-led research. And what's really, really cool about this one, I think, is the diversity of what we're going to be having presented to us, and different looks from a youth perspective, a policy perspective, a creating frameworks and creating a tools perspective. So those are just fantastic. Again, we do have the bios for both Hannah and Sneha listed. Don just put them in the chat, so please do take a look. The way this session is going to work is a little different than the ones that have been going through today. Each presenter is going to speak for about 20 minutes. They both have some slides to show you as well, and a story to tell you. Really exciting. And then after each presentation, we'll actually take some time to have 7 to 8 minutes of questions. So again, may I please remind you to write your questions always in the Q&A, and to write anything that you want to have conversations about, or you want to share that's not a question. Please continue to have those fantastic conversations in the chat. But when the questions go in the Q&A, we'll really try to make sure that those are the ones that are looked at. So that's great. And Hannah, we're going to start with you. You're up. So please do give a little introduction and just take us forward. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Linda, for giving me the space and the opportunity to speak. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Hannah Wei. I am the co-lead and co-founder at the Patient-Led Research Collaborative. I'll be talking a little bit more about the Patient-Led Research Collaborative, or PLRC, in my talk. My background is from computer science and biomedical computing. I am also a long COVID patient advocate. I was sick since March 2020, and it took me a very long time to find the resources and the support to feel better and get better. And we are still fighting for more resources, more research, and more collaborative action. I'm really pleased to present my talk. I don't know if I should share my screen right now. I think Did
your
that
screen
work?
is shared. Yeah, your screen is on share.
Okay,
We have it. Thanks, Hannah.
perfect. So I'm really excited to share this talk called Building Effective Research Collaborations with Patients. We at Patient-Led Research Collaborative have been doing this for about 3 years, and we've discovered quite a few best practices throughout our collaborations, and we're happy to share them. So without further ado, let's see. The agenda for this talk, we are going to talk about the story of the Patient-Led Research Collaborative, how we came to be as a team, and what were some of the pain points we encountered looking at some opportunities and collaborations that we've taken on. Number 2, we'll break down some of the research process that we've discovered that to work for us by having patients at the table driving and co-leading research. And then last but not least, we'll take a look at PLRC's resource that we've developed in collaboration with CMSS, the Council of Specialty Medicine. And I'll talk a little bit about how to use the scorecard for your own research collaborations, whether you're a patient or an organization. So who we are, the PLRC is a collaborative. Now we have over 50 members in this collaborative, and our backgrounds are in medicine, participatory design, neuroscience, public policy, cognitive science, research engineering, data science, machine learning, biostatistics, virology, immunology, psychiatry, you name it. We also have folks who come from just all walks of life, who built up a really good baseline of knowledge with their lived experiences. So it's not just from our careers, but also from lived experiences with long COVID. We came together out of a need for answers. And during April 2020, in the height of the first wave of the pandemic in North America, we formed a team through Slack. It's a Slack channel on formerly Body Politic, which is a support group for long COVID patients, by long COVID patients. And we specifically came together into a channel called Data Nerds, where we shared papers and we shared our own tracking analysis on how we are coping with COVID and long COVID. This is a self-selecting group of people who are interested in answers and data and research. We are motivated by our own health and the health of our loved ones. There's no ego involvement. We're highly collaborative, in part by necessity, by trading off tasks due to unpredictable health. So because we are a collaborative of disabled people, we run ourselves as a collaborative team when people can come in and out depending on their own health. We have put together quite a few press and also reports in media early on, and then that carried forward into research work. So a little bit about our research work. We have 3 patient-led papers, including international study with 8,000 long COVID participants from 80 plus countries and 9 languages, 7 co-authored papers. And I think there's more now. We just came out with another one with folks from Yale, WHO, National COVID Cohort Collaborative, that's from the US, and the University of Toronto. We've also collaborated with UCL, Imperial College London, we've also collaborated with. So our team's research this year, we've been published in Nature Reviews, Frontiers, The Lancet. I can go on. But if you're a patient, I highly recommend reading the Nature Review publication. It talks a little bit more about long COVID and major findings and mechanisms. This review was co-written by my own colleagues, but also collaborators at Scripps with the patient audience in mind. So it's very accessible, and this is kind of how we like to do research. Some of the other initiatives that we're involved with, we have a patient-generated hypothesis journal. This is how we come up with research questions, and we just systematize this process by making it open for the community to submit hypotheses, and we have a panel to assess how well they are written, and we edit alongside the authors themselves, and we put that together into a hypothesis journal. And we disseminate that into the research community for other teams to pick up on. We also have been running a $5 million biomedical research fund. This is an big innovative project for our team because we have a completely patient-driven panel. So everybody who manages the fund and awards research teams are patients themselves with scientific backgrounds. So that's been a huge undertaking for us. And I'll talk a little bit about our patient-led research model now. We run our team and projects based on principles of patient-led research, and this prioritizes several things. So we look for relevant research. We set research agendas based on relevant priorities that directly serve patients. We look for collaboration, so meaningful collaboration with the science community. This means co-designing studies and doing analysis side by side with both teams. Community-focused collaborations as well. We have the patient community raise questions based on lived experiences, and this ties directly into our hypothesis project. And patient researchers also help translate papers into accessible material for the community. So that's the hypothesis, but also some of the papers we've written as well. And obviously, we prioritize impact. So patient researchers disseminate their research into open access academic papers that anybody in the community can open and share and try to understand. And this helps to bring up the overall scientific knowledge of the patient community. So for the rest of the talk, I want to now jump into the tool that we developed. It's a series of scorecards that will help you and hopefully your organization incorporate some of these values and practices into your own collaborations. So shaping the research process. Now, I want to get a little bit into why we're doing this and what we've noticed doing writing papers and trying to put together a team of 50 to really dig into long COVID and come up with hypotheses. We've been doing this for 3 years, and we've noticed that when patients are approached for collaboration, our involvement is often confined into a specific time and place during the research process. And one obvious example is when teams will come and ask us, hey, you're a bunch of patients who are familiar with the long COVID community. Can you help us recruit for your study? Right. That is a very easy way to get patients involved, but that is also not the most meaningful way if we want to build partnerships that last long term and also takes advantage of the value that patients put on the table. So we want to move patient involvement from a more contractual model to kind of a peer production and co-leadership model. And this language comes from this wonderful paper, Levels of Public Participation in Science from 2012. And it describes how we can move from a more crowdsourcing, contributory patient involvement into a more peer production process where patients are involved in the research questions, in the study design, in the collection and processing data, and in analyzing and interpreting this data. I mean, this is all the stuff that my team gets involved in throughout our process of writing papers and collaborating with other academic institutions. But we saw this as an opportunity to really abstract our process and talk more about how we make this work for us, as well as give tools for others too. So we came up with a scorecard. And this resource is available on our website. It's available in this link. And I think the folks, the wonderful conference organizers have also put this on their website as well. So feel free to check this out. This is a free resource for the patient community and the research community. This scorecard, we want this to be a self-assessment and a resource planning tool for effective patient engagement. For patients and patient organizations, it is meant to help you ask for the right questions and negotiate the collaborations that benefit you. And for everyone, this is to help to create a shared dialogue between patients and partners to create a new baseline of acceptable and meaningful collaboration. The scorecard is part of a playbook. The playbook just describes more of the case studies and how to use the scorecard. And it's called The Promise of Patient-Led Research Integration into Clinical Registries and Research. It's pretty long, so we just call it a scorecard. So we set out to create these scorecards using 4 dimensions of collaboration. As I mentioned before, the collaboration between patients and research partners has a few caveats that we've seen before. And so we wanted to really dig into the nuance of the power dynamics at play, the types of collaborations that we see, and the types of organizations that we tend to interact with. And so After about a dozen expert interviews and 2 series of synthesis, we did a qualitative study basically on this process. We came up with 4 dimensions of collaboration, and these are research organization readiness, which measures the ability of the research organization to engage meaningfully. The integration into the research process, this one measures how effectively patients are involved at every phase of the research process. This is something that the PLRC really stresses. We like to get people involved early, and we like to get people involved at every stage. The patient partner governance scorecard measures how decision-making power and governance is shared between patient groups and partners. And last but not least, patient burden. This one measures the degree to which patient burden is addressed, and how that's being raised through the research process. With these scorecards, you can see how there's a line across the top with colors. We've actually scored them with a model that has minus, and we debated for a long time whether or not to implement this. But we took inspiration from another paper, Arnstein's model. There's a ladder of citizen participation, it's called, and they also had a negative scoring. And with this in mind, we want to address, we really want to set the tone for a new acceptable baseline of collaboration, and that is 0. If you score 0 on these scorecards, you are doing, what is effective for the patient community, but also there's room for improvement. But if there is no collaboration, if there's minimal collaboration, that's kind of below the baseline for us, and that's, there's a lot of room for improvement. So that's how we came up with the scoring. Now, I want to dig a little bit more into some of the scorecards, and I know I don't have a lot of time. All these scorecards are all available on the website, as I said. So I'll just dig into one of the 4 scorecards and then brief you on the other 3. So this one I'm pretty passionate about. The Patient Org Readiness Scorecard measures the ability of a partner organization to engage in meaningful patient partnership. We made this scorecard after realizing that some of the issues we've had in the collaboration process isn't always motivating patients and training patients to be more involved in research, but also whether our collaborators have the values, the resources, and the priorities, right, to carry out a mutually fruitful partnership. And we set out to design the scorecard with 3 subdimensions: the recognition of biases, the collaboration process, and knowledge and the disease subject. This readiness assessment allows patients to really dig into whether the research organization's level of collaboration and willingness to, share control, it works for the patient group. And it also allows for the research organization or research team, if you're a PI, to assess whether you have the capacity and the resources in play to really bring patients to the table, and have a ideal collaboration with these groups long term. So digging into some of the we call these the sub scores, the recognition of biases, right? This one is about resources that's available to listen to feedback from the patient group, and actively iterate on the feedback that's given. The research organizations that have a systemic process for accepting input from patient groups are the ones that we find to be more successful in the long term with these collaborations. So the -1 and -2, this one we've seen quite a bit in practice, which is, as I mentioned before, patients are kind of shoved into a pigeonhole where they are expected to contribute in a very limited way, and there's really no room to have a say in how they're contributing and shaping this collaboration. The acceptable baseline is research organization is aware of their own biases. In the case of long COVID, right, we see quite often that research teams might come in with a set hypothesis. They think, oh, the issue with long COVID is that this is quite a common example, is that people have unaddressed mental health issues, right? And the patient community goes, no, right? We are actually struggling to find the resources and the right tests to tease out the diagnosis. For example, if they have brain fog, that's sometimes brain damage, and they don't have access to the right tests and the right labs to detect that, right? So when a research team comes in and say, oh, well, this might be your mental health problem, or like, okay, here's the evidence that says otherwise. And, if they are listening to this feedback, this can be a really great collaboration. I'm going to speed through the rest. Okay, so the other subdimensions, collaboration process, the ideal collaboration process in our experience and from the experience of folks that we talk to is to have an established infrastructure in place for collaborating with patients that's vetted by other patients and other patient groups. So what that means in practice sometimes is having at least one dedicated person on the team who's focused on meeting the patient group's needs. The partner is trusted within the patient community, and they also have some training involved. Knowledge and disease subject. This is quite an obvious one, although we highlight this in particular because long COVID is such an, I wouldn't say new, but it's such a novel area of research that there's quite a lot of academics and teams coming in from other domains. And so, when we go out and seek these collaborations, we look for folks who have direct experience with long COVID patients. That's really important to us. And these people are in the decision-making roles. The research organization ideally has a systemic way to keep on top of the information from the patient community as well as the latest research. It sounds very obvious, but there's something to be stated to be important to patients. Some of the key takeaways for this scorecard is to have a systemic process, have dedicated resources, be humble about one's own biases as a researcher. Speeding this through. We have several other scorecards. This one is about integration into the research process. It breaks down into 5 subdimensions coordinating to the stage of the research. So we have hypothesis generation, study design, analysis, publication, attribution. At each stage, patients can do quite a lot and bring a lot to the table. So I invite you to read through this scorecard to see where we set our baseline and where is the ideal collaboration dynamic. Mm-hmm. Patient governance scorecard. This one measures this meaningful decision-making between the groups and accountability. It helps to evaluate how decisions are being made and what that culture is on these groups and who can be accountable when things go wrong.
I think, Hannah, maybe we can just, I know you have more to cover, but I'm wondering, because there's some questions coming up and I have some here, maybe they'll be covered as you go over. You can start incorporating what you haven't gone over, maybe as we go over our discussion and questions. Is that okay? Because I don't want to cut off your questions.
Yeah, that actually works quite well because I think everything that's left are just how to use these scorecards,
Yeah,
use cases.
and we're gonna have all of that. So first of all, I want to say a huge thank you, Hannah, to you. This is probably the third or fourth presentation that I've gone with you or one of your team having gone over this, and I've used these course cards myself in academic settings when I've been teaching about patient engagement. So just brilliant to see what you've put forward, and I see a lot of people having a lot of comments saying, "Wow, this is great." So let's go through some of those. One of them that comes from Helen. She put, "Is there concern over how we teach or train patient partners without," and I quote, "molding them into what the research org wants them to be?" So, how do we eliminate the bias and power imbalance in that process? And how do you suggest maybe the scorecards? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the process of the research and the patients filling out the scorecards and how you bring that together to take some of that bias out and to put some learnings, some teachings into researchers that might have biases that they're blind to, but they're nice people. We just want to help them.
Yes, of course. This we encounter this all the time when researchers come to us and ask us for knowledgeable patients and to integrate into their study and whatnot. And usually they come with set expectations of how the patients should be contributing. We don't typically get folks who want to train patients because I guess PLRC has a reputation of we already have published papers and we can speak on the same wavelength with folks in academia. But we do get folks joining the PLRC who don't have as much scientific background, including myself. Actually, I had to upskill quite a bit. So I think a great way for folks to not apply that thinking of, oh, patients need these kinds of training, let's get them through these set programs, is to really listen to the patient community and the research and the issues that we prioritize.
Okay.
And try to work with the patient community on surfacing research questions. And this ties back into the let me just try to find that slide. The integrating into the research process. So we like to, for our collaborations, we like to come in at the hypothesis generation stage.
Right.
And this involves having patients at the table when the research questions are being set, not after, right? It's pretty common when researchers come to us and say, hey, look, can you review this manuscript? And we're like, this is not our priorities and we don't have expertise in this, for example. So it's easier to involve patients in the beginning where the hypothesis isn't set in stone. Patients can steer these conversations based on both their lived experiences, but also some patients have medical degrees and some patients used to work in labs like my colleagues and can bring a lot to the table.
Right.
I hope that answers the question.
No, it does. It does. And I think it leads nicely into, there's a few questions that are coming in different ways. And one of them, I'm going to merge three different questions that have come together. But so the first part of it is, who have you received feedback on the scorecards from? And based on that feedback, have you tweaked them as time has gone on? And I know there's a version 1 and a new version, because I know you sent me a newer version at some point in time. So that's one question. How do you take your feedback? Who do you get it from? How many orgs have used them, and have the organizations kind of given us or given you some information about how helpful they were? And how did the researchers partake in this, or was this something that was done completely by patients, and then these baseline numbers that you had, you kind of said, well, this is what they are? Because if I'm understanding what you have said, including previously, you want organizations and patients to use the scorecards. So can you fit that picture together with that?
Yes, for sure. We've gotten feedback from one of our partners, the Light Collective. They actually do amazing work in also helping patients negotiate their digital data rights, and so they're always talking to other patient groups or research groups that are taking this data. And so they themselves need to have a good resource for how to just be more involved in the process. And so they used our scorecards, and they've surfaced our scorecards with their stakeholders as well. Mm-hmm. And the feedback we've gotten is that it's a conversation opener, right? For a lot of these teams that are wanting that, as you said, they might not have the experience of involving patients, but they're very excited to open the table for patients to come in. This resource helps them really set a good baseline and go into a collaboration with the right mindset. And so if anything, it's a great conversation opener. And with the feedback that comes in, we haven't formally been tracking feedback. Officially, we kind of released this into the wild and told our collaborators and then allies just play with it to let us know how it works out. We'd love to hear any results. And so we've been getting just passive feedback from emails, mostly folks telling us that, this was a great resource to send out to their existing partners, and it helped them to kind of speak for their needs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'm very pleased to hear that, and we'll have to end like quite shortly, just to have enough time to discussion.
Yeah, for sure.
I envision the day on this earth when researchers and partners and organizations get together and have these conversations and rate themselves above and prior to the start of any project as they move through it. And maybe even in the middle of it, do it again and say, are we still on board here? Are we still moving forward? And then maybe do it at the end and see where it's there. And it would be lovely over time to see grant agencies put it into, similar to how we never used to have patients involved in research except as participants, and then we started to ask them. So Hannah, I can only say to you and your team, you have been so innovative. You have been so wonderful in taking, parts of your brilliance all together while you're still facing such battles with your disease processes and moving this along. So I really say thank you. There's lots of great comments there too. And I think we want to create partnerships and we want to help researchers learn as much as we have to learn. Because may I suggest to you, it's not just the -1s and -2s maybe in the organization or research. Maybe there's something that we have to look at as patients ourselves to uncover some of our own unconscious biases, etc. So I would have loved to had an hour or more just with you, but I think you've done more than due justice here. And I thank you very much and like to turn over to our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Linda.
Okay, God bless you. Thanks. Okay, so now we're going to go on to our next conversation, and it's quite different. So I'm really looking forward to this. And we had a conversation, the three of us, as we were planning this, and I'm just thrilled that they're both a little bit different. So Sneha, take it away, and you go forward, take your time, and then we'll have some questions at the end, and then we'll close up for the day, okay?
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Sneha. I am a young adult patient. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis when I was 6 years old, and I'm now 25. And I have had all the major surgeries throughout adolescence and young adulthood, like the colectomy surgery, etc. And I created Generation Patient when I was about 13-ish years old. And it started out just as a small newsletter for young adults with inflammatory bowel diseases. But we slowly grew from a newsletter to what we are today, where we facilitate events, meetings, and programs. And I'm going to focus this talk a little bit more on our interests and our focus on creating evidence for some of the issue areas that we work on, which I'll share a little bit more about. But before I do so, I just wanted to share, we have an incredible team. We're 100% young adult patient led in our staff. And we have multiple young adult patients who guide a lot of our other work as well. We have an awesome board as well. One thing that's really important to us, especially as you'll see in the work that we do, is that we are 100% independent of private healthcare industry funding, which is important to us at a time when so many in our community struggle with access and affordability, particularly here in the United States, where the majority of our community is. However, we have quite a few young adult patients that we work with internationally as well. So a little bit more about the structure of Generation Patient before I get into a little bit more of the meat of the work that we do. So we do events, programs, and meetings. We have a big focus area on peer support, interventions, the second being within health policy, and the third within higher education. And within each of these areas, we are partnering, we have active partnerships with academics and physicians to help drive some of the evidence that we know doesn't exist for some of the systems advocacy that we're trying to do. And I just want to also highlight that the majority of our work is focusing on systems that are based here in the United States. Although I'm in France right now, so I don't know why I said here in the United States, but back in the United States. And a lot of it is based on the issues and challenges that we've had as young adult patients navigating various systems as we enter adulthood. We have one disease-specific program where we are doing a lot of our work in publishing some areas of research that we feel like as young adult patients, we really need to be driven forward. But the Crohn's and Colitis Young Adults Network is our only disease-specific programming, but we have young adult patients from lupus, arthritis, Ehlers-Danlos syndromes, et cetera, who participate in all of our programming. I'm not going to talk too much about our virtual health advocacy summit. It's going on actually at the same time as this event, not the same time, but the same dates. It's in the evenings, our time, but just wanted to share that. So I wanted to talk first about our health policy lab. And I think this is an area where we have been really passionate about, especially because we have seen a lot of the policies that impact us not actively include patients within the designing and the evidence creation behind the policies. And I think that's really important because oftentimes we as patients are asked to speak on Congress, on testimonies, et cetera, which is really important. But I also think that patients need to be integrated within policies, and particularly those that are affecting us the most. And so there's three areas that we focus on Generation Patient, and three areas where we're driving a lot of the work. And so one is on patent reform. So again, in the United States, we have a huge issue with the over-patenting of prescription medicines, which reduces timely biosimilar availability, biosimilar or generic availability. And this is really critical because unfortunately, like it can take years and years for us to get access to more affordable options. And there's not a lot of public pressure in some of the disease areas that we feel like have really been affected by the over-patenting of these medicines. And so that's an area that we work in. The second is in clinical trials and adverse event reporting. And all of these areas that we work on are really born out of experiences of ourselves as part of the leadership team or part of those who are part of our community. And so I'm just going to share really quickly, go to the next slide, why we are focused on clinical trials and adverse event reporting, and why we're sort of doing studies in specific disease areas that really affect young adults differently. So a huge area that we recognize is this global lack of consensus for what really constitutes a young adult within regulatory agencies here in the United States and also abroad. And so one of the things that we really noticed was that when we were looking across these regulatory agencies, we noticed there was a huge disparity in the way that young adults are included or called out as like a separate age demographic. So if you take a look at FAERS, for example, the FDA adverse event reporting system, 18-year-olds and 60-year-olds are grouped in the same demographic, which is highly concerning, given the potential differing drug disposition and adverse events. And then you see CDC's obviously is something a lot more reasonable and stratified by ages that make a lot more sense. And so as we're looking at this, we noticed a lot. So, this is just an example of the lack of consensus. But as we look at this, we noticed that there is a huge lack of research into whether and how much young adults are actually represented in trials, and whether there could even be a potential differing epidemiology for certain diseases. So with adolescent and young adult oncology for a lot of cancers, we saw that it was noted that there could be potential differing epidemiology for certain cancers rather than pediatrics and rather than adults. And so for conditions like inflammatory bowel diseases, where there's a peak onset now in adolescence, it's very concerning to us that a lot of this research hasn't moved forward. And so right now, we're working with academics to look at regulatory, some of the multidisciplinary reviews, and to determine how age has been included within some trials that are particularly focused on diseases that affect young adults. And that's been really meaningful because, again, it's something where we as a patient group has been able to identify an issue and partner with academics to drive more of the technical parts of research, involved just under the mentorship of a lot of academics. And the last issue is pharmaceutical direct-to-consumer advertising on social media. This is an issue that is particular to the United States and New Zealand because it's not legal in any other country, but we have a huge issue with an increase of influencers advertising prescription medicines, and we're very concerned because young adult patients are probably one of the most vulnerable on social media as it pertains to these advertisements. And so there's almost no evidence that exists right now online in terms of no studies. And that is really difficult for us because when we're advocating for increased oversight of pharmaceutical advertisements, it's hard because, we advocate with anecdotal experience, which is important, but we also noticed quickly that we would need more research and more publications to be able to actually get the people we want to listen. So we're working with a couple of professors to do a content analysis and subsequently an RCT that really highlights the extent of the problem that we're seeing as a patient group. And I think, in some ways it is unfortunate that we sort of as a patient group have been burdened to do a lot of this evidence generation. But I think at the same time, it's really exciting because it shows that, patients are very much capable of driving a lot of this policy, and that we don't have to be included as like an end of the policy, just like a spokesperson for the policy, but we can actually be integrated within the policy measures. I'm going to just check my time. Okay. And oh yes, also I wanted to say that all of what we do is with our community. So, we have this Health Policy Scholars Program. It trains 9 young adult patients from across disease groups, and they participate in all aspects of our health policy work, as well as receive health policy education, which is really cool because, we feel a great sense of duty to be able to train our peers and to train the next generation of patient advocates. And I think there was a question that alluded to this before, but we need more and more patients in the patient advocacy space, and we need a lot more experiences, and being able to have patients who are just getting involved in this space and are able to look at things with a different lens is really, really important to us. And so and sorry, I'm giving a very high level overview, so I'm happy to answer questions, but I also want to get to some of the other areas. One of our other areas is focused on peer support, which is completely different than health policy. So I just want you to switch gears in your head now. But our work in peer support is really something that's very meaningful to me because we look at peer support as an intervention rather than just a service. So we know that suicide rates are very high within our community of young adults with chronic and rare conditions. And it's really sad because we haven't seen enough interventions being studied for a demographic in terms of reducing isolation, increasing self-efficacy, self-management, etc. And so since March of 2020, we've been doing virtual peer support meetings. We've done, this says 450, but easily over 500 now. And we do these to connect young adult patients on a variety of topics. So, some of these peer support meetings are not even focused on the disease, like we have poetry workshops or neurographic art workshops, etc. And what we're really excited about is that we are currently doing research evaluation with Boston Children's and we're going through their IRB, which is really important and really a hassle, but I think it's worth it that we have such incredible academic partners to evaluate our peer support meetings. Again, because we believe so much in the power of these peer support meetings, and the anecdotal evidence is very obvious, but until we have research and evidence showing the power of it, it's hard to go to medical systems to really advocate for more peer support opportunities. So that's one of the ways that we've kind of are trying to use our programming to also implement more systems change. And then next week, we're also announcing a big award that we received to look at peer support as an intervention focused on patient-centered outcomes research as well. Now, switching gears to our work in higher education, last year in I think February of 2022, we held our roundtable on chronic medical disabilities in higher education. And we did this because, again, we found very little research that captured the experiences of students, particularly with chronic medical disabilities, and the dynamic nature of our condition within institutions of higher education. Sorry, I was just seeing the chat feature. So we brought together a variety of different stakeholders, whether that was higher ed deans of universities, mental health counselors, and of course, disabled students. And we published this large document. And thereafter, we are doing, again, IRB research focus on standardized testing and the barriers that exist for students with chronic medical disabilities to even just enter higher education. And again, a huge reason, and sorry to keep saying this, that we had to do this was because we went to the large entity in the United States that has the power to increase access to accommodations for disabled students. And unfortunately, we found that they were also looking for evidence because they, weren't going to listen to a bunch of young adult patients who, had this valuable experience, but unfortunately we have to have that actual research. So that's one of the ways and one of the things that came out of this roundtable. And I think it really shows the power of bringing together a variety of different backgrounds to be able to, understand where research can go. And this roundtable proceedings document is heavily focused on what the unmet needs are in a way that we hope other researchers can use to identify meaningful research questions that we as patients would like to have answered. I won't go into this. And the last thing I really wanted to highlight was our only disease-specific programming. It almost operates as an autonomous organization because for this, this is where we're really releasing a lot of our work and disseminating it to researchers directly in the IBD space, inflammatory bowel disease space. So the Crohn's and Colitis Young Adults Network, again, has its own website, almost its own team, etc. But it's a program through Generation Patient. We have facilitated 5 years of a fellowship program where we train about, I think, 6 to 9 young adults with inflammatory bowel diseases from around the world. So we've had fellows from India, Ethiopia, Dubai, Malaysia, Greece, and of course the United States, and they produce monthly content for our website. They hear from monthly speakers. And one thing that we identified as we were doing this fellowship program was the value of partnerships with healthcare professionals. And one of the things that we have had the opportunity to do over the last 3 years is to bring our fellows to a US-based academic conference called Advances in Inflammatory Bowel Diseases, where we have patients, in the room with healthcare professionals advocating for what the next generation of patients are looking for within research, et cetera. I won't talk too much about our IBD Medical Student Scholars Program. That is for medical students medical students who are interested in the fields of young adults with IBD. But moving on, so as part of the Crohn's and Colitis Young Adults Network, one thing that evolved out of our fellowship program was our roundtable on young adults with IBD. So the way that we've designed this and the impetus for this was really to have patients and healthcare professionals and community partners in the room to design where we as a community could go with research, basically. And I think this gets to Hannah's point earlier, where we really want, patients and us as people with lived experience to be there from the beginning, if not designing the research question on our, through our own experiences. And so every single month we do a roundtable session. We've had our last roundtable just a couple of weeks ago was focused on sexual health and young adults with IBD. We have one coming up this month focused on clinical trials in young adults with IBD. And the way we've designed these roundtables is that we have 20 minutes of a presentation. So a patient and a healthcare professional gives a presentation. And it's just a basic 20-minute overview of like the topic. So for example, like with sexual health, we have the healthcare professional talk for 10 minutes about the current existing research in this area. And then if there is any, and then the patient talked about the lived experience. And then we open up for discussion questions to try to develop a meaningful research next direction. Linda, I see you come on, so I'm going to speed it up in 2 seconds. And then
no worries.
For 60 to 90 minutes, we have a facilitated discussion between patients and professionals. And then we collect main themes and publish a proceedings document. So we have 4 publications that are out. And we have partnered with Healthcare Transitions, which is a peer-reviewed journal, to do this. And it's, again, just super cool because young adults with IBD are leading this effort. And we have incredible doctors who have partnered and mentored us throughout the way of writing these publications, but it's really us driving the language, and everything else is part of these publications. So yeah, I think that's about it. And then one other thing I just think is really great, I'll just stop share for a second, is the opportunity for for us to really include patients. And I think one of the ways that we try to do that, at least have like an open resource for researchers, is through this just very quick PowerPoint that we created that actually has almost like 15 or 20 of our alumni who are young adults with IBD who can partner with researchers in specific areas. So just really trying to get more patients integrated within RCTs that researchers are already doing, et cetera, which is really exciting. So I will pause there. And yes.
You know what? You are amazing. And the diversity of information that you've given us is a lot to take in a very, very good way. I give total kudos to you. I also think I mispronounced your name a little bit, and for that, I apologize from my heart. So excuse me. But we do have some questions coming up, and I do want to make use of the time that we have left. You talked a little bit about partnering with researchers, academics, doctors. You've used kind of different words. How did your group overall decide which academics to partner with? How did that relationship come about?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think some of the times it's been us reaching out directly to researchers that we've seen in this area. And part of it is just to, we didn't start out asking to partner on research. I think some of this has just came with us looking at what the current evidence exists for the particular area and reaching out to ask more questions. And that has probably just been where naturally we've been able to evolve and partner with these researchers, et cetera. So I think, we've been really lucky that we've found really great people. I should also say, I don't think that that's maybe the norm, but we have found really great people.
That's fantastic. And it's a good way to hear about it too. There's one question that's quite particular and kind of pointy-ended, but that's okay. I'm just wondering if you can explain how inclusive you are with patients with different type of colitis. And they put a few examples of words that you guys would know, living with your disease, like microscopic, lymphocytic, et cetera, or someone in the healthcare, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. So how broad, I guess, is the inclusion within the group?
Yeah, I mean, very, very much so. We have, completely differing degrees of Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. And in fact, we just mostly say inflammatory bowel diseases, and not everybody even discloses, if they have Crohn's or colitis or which type of colitis that they have. And so, and even within our broader programming, we're not disease specific at all. So we have a a lot of people with more rare conditions as well, which is really important to us too. So
okay, well, that's great. I'm wondering, we all want to like you share and learn, and you're sharing and learning with us, which is excellent. But you guys have done so much work in bringing things forward, which is a real foundation and templates for others. So Karen actually would like to know, is there an umbrella group maybe for young adults and children and those that are patient advocates where excellent work that you have just shared with us can be shared, so each patient advocacy group doesn't have to reinvent the wheel if they want to do something similar in the same vein, perhaps in a different disease, or perhaps take it in a different direction? How do you go about doing that?
yeah, so I mean, we don't have a formal way of doing that, but I think we are always willing to like lend our experiences. We have a lot of young adult patients. Like some of our peer support facilitators will go to like a smaller patient advocacy group and do peer support facilitation for them, etc. But we really are trying to find more ways to integrate other groups within our efforts too. We held a roundtable on patent reform this past June, where we included a lot of patient advocacy groups as well that were interested in learning more about patent reform. But we hope to do that in the future, and we definitely welcome any advice or suggestions for that too.
That's good. And even maybe, I mean, you might even have done it, but some type of process article in a journal that talks about processes of setting things up. Yeah. I find we all forget sometimes in the research world, in the healthcare world, all this wonderful stuff takes a lot of wonderful time from many, many people before. So if others are trying to do it, let's give them a template to how to help them. I have two other questions for you that just kind of from an interest perspective. Very interesting that you focus on policy, and I love it, because what I find as a retired healthcare executive nurse and now patient for quite a few years is that so many regular people living in the streets, we don't think about policy. We don't think about how policy and healthcare policy affects things that affect us. It affects everything from trials to disease process treatments to how healthcare is shaped around us, no matter what country you're in. So how did your thinking and how did your brain kind of put that policy like twist on everything that you do? And then I see you teach people. One of my questions were, did you train people? I love that you've put together this health policy lab and education for it. Do you share that education more broadly? And may I suggest those that are 36 to 80 could benefit from that as much as those that are under. So maybe share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the ways that I actually got really interested in policy and we entered this space as an organization was because we saw the just inherent conflicts of interest with a lot of drug pricing issues in the United States. Unfortunately, we found that a lot of patient advocacy groups that were receiving millions from private healthcare industry weren't talking about lowering drug prices on things like the Inflation Reduction Act, on the over patenting of Humira, for example. And I think that was really upsetting for us just to come to know, and really propelled us that we wanted to use our independent voice, and we wanted to make sure that us as like a truly patient driven organization, we're able to make sure that our patient community was represented. And so I think we have had to learn so much. I mean, patents feels like the most far removed thing from our experience as patients, but we want to also drive that systems change, and we want to make sure that the patients that come behind us also are able to have access to affordable treatments as well.
Well, that's fantastic. I think a lot of the resources you've shared can be shared so broadly, and I think a lot of us are going to be looking them up. And I just see Amanda wrote, to steal Linda's words from earlier, wow. I mean, you're both. And Hannah, please come back on. We're just going to close out the day in the last minute. I think this was like a rock and roll, big bang on the drum finish to the day. It was just excellent. It's been my privilege to be your host all day and to moderate this with the both of you. So I want to thank you very, very much. And I want to thank everyone for listening and staying with us right to the end of the day. I do want to say that there is going to be a survey about your experiences of PxP in day 2. We're intending to run this for patients by patients for at least the next 2 years. And we really need some notes and feedback to help us in 2024. So the survey link will get posted there in just a sec. There is one more day. It is at a different time. We hope you can join us tomorrow for day 3. If you're not already registered, you can still register. If you are registered, you should have your Zoom links. The timing is different tomorrow so that our viewers in both Asia and Australia, and there's quite a few from Australia, have a chance to participate in the live event. So please do continue sharing on social media, hashtag PxP23. And everyone, we will see you tomorrow, September 14th in North and South America, Europe and Africa, or September 15th in Asia and Australia. And I thank you so much and hope you have a wonderful day, evening. Thanks again. And we are signing off.